Hi guys, Maurice here. Just wanted to do a quick FlexTime audio editing tutorial. So I'm going to run through this as quickly as I can. I have here before you some tracks that were recorded by yours truly. And he's a pretty good drummer, but at certain points he was a bit off time. So I'm going to show you how off time just by playing a little bit. And I'm going to turn the metronome settings back on. Alright, so as you can see, he got off a bit, right? So I'm going to loop this just to play with it and show you a place where the editing will occur, just for fun. In fact, normally, of course, I would edit the whole song as necessary to keep him in time. But what I want to do here is just create some edits that keep his beat in time with my click track or my metronome or the song's tempo without making major changes to its feel. So the first thing is to group the drums. You do so from the mixer usually. Just select them all and create a group. I've already done so. So what I'm going to do is just show you the settings in the group because those are also important. On that particular group, let's see if I can make this window bigger. The drum group, I've selected editing and quantize locked. What that does is if I select one track, and let's turn off the group for a second, Shift G in my case to turn off the group. If I can select individual tracks or edit any individual tracks. You don't want that with things like multitracks. You want them grouped and locked so that when you select or cut any one track like so, it cuts them all. So if I delete it, it deletes them all. All right. In this case, we're not doing any cuts. We're going to do some FlexTime editing to create a nice, even, smooth drum flow without changing its feel too much. All right. First thing is to, as we said, create the group, and then to, within the tracks, deselect the tracks that don't present fantastic transients. So the ones we want this Q toggle selected for are usually kick and snare. I'm going to turn off even most of those, and just leave a few. Turn off my room mic on the sphere mic. And now, so this loop is out of time. If it was perfectly in time, it would be a smooth loop. So what I'm going to do to create this rhythmical, smooth flowing tempo without changing its feel is to turn on FlexTime. For drums, by the way, the correct mode is not rhythmic. It's actually slicing. So it's going to take a while to cut that on. And as it does, analyze each of those tracks, which are pretty long. It's actually a pretty long song. As it analyzes each of those tracks, and it's going to do something which I actually don't want by default. And it's important that I show you this. Logic is going to analyze those tracks and create transient markers for every individual transient it can find on each individual track. That's a problem because it'll create little artifacts when it has too many transients selected. So you have two options, which is to select each of the tracks and open up the wave editor and reduce the number of transients in each track. Or what I usually do is what I'm going to show you now is to just use the eraser tool to delete all the transient markers. You're technically not getting rid of the transient markers. You're just telling Logic not to use its analysis to move the transients for anyone to any of those devices, any of those tracks. All right, so what's important, I'm going to zoom in here, and you can see all those transient markers. It created a transient marker. They actually didn't do a bad job for this particular track. But there's still some I don't want, like this extra hit here from the snare on the. I don't want all those. And all the hi-hats hits are also creating transient markers. I don't want those. I want just the major hits from the kick and snare to control any of the FlexTime edits. So I'm going to use the eraser tool and carefully erase. I'm not going to do the whole song. I'm just going to go through these few measures so I can show you it's the same process no matter how many edits you're going to do. But you'd need to literally go through the entire song and remove. Oops, I just erased the whole track. But you can tell they're deleted if they look like this with the little dotted lines instead of the solid lines like this. If you delete them, then it becomes little dotted vertical lines. All right, so all the transient markers have been not so much deleted as much as told not to be used. You've told Logic not to use them for these edits. And that means you can do something really simple. Let's remove a few more before this so I can really, well, okay, it's fine. All right, so I'm gonna, now I can move that that first hit to the beginning of this measure exactly. And you'll notice what's important here is that the phase relationship between all of these tracks is kept intact. So all of these tracks have moved together so that the snares and kick drum hits and cymbal hits do not move. That's important because if I edited these tracks separately, I would definitely make mistakes. We're human. And that would cause the phase relationships to be changed. So the beginning of the hit on the kick at the beginning of the downbeat is correct now. And I'm going to do the same for the end of the measure. And you'll see that mostly the measure's now in line. Now, I'm not going to fix everything. I could fix this too and make it perfect. But generally speaking, I don't. Because even without making it perfect, with the beginning of this measure and that measure, I generally try to just not change every measure. And I try to change as little as possible to keep the drummer's feel. Because usually everybody played with them anyway. But now I'm going to undo these edits so you can see how much different this sounds. So let's turn the click track back on. And then redo those edits. It's so tight now you can't even hear the clicks all the time, and it's really going to allow you to have a really smooth drum track in time with your song without totally changing the feel of the drummer's work. Now, I will note something I was about to forget, and that is when editing fills, I generally try not to touch them so much. I'll let them go slightly off time, and in some cases, I'll even cut around a fill, like so, to allow that fill to have its natural feel, because drummers do move a lot more when they're doing fills. And then I'll go back to the edit mode and move the downbeats. Let me do this correctly. Move the downbeats back on beat again. So you'll have a really natural fill, but you won't have a really unnatural sounding relationship between that fill and the next beat when it hits back on. In some cases, you have no choice because the fill will be so far out of time with the actual tempo of the song that you'll have to make some changes, or you can even drag that region, because this mode allows you to drag a region and all the tracks are dragged together. It's really cool. At any rate, that's it for this part of the flex editing tutorial that I wanted to show you. What I also wanted to show you is something that comes up a lot for remixers. I'm going to save the close and save that. And thanks to Big New York, I'm using his track, and it'll be released on an album hopefully later this year. And Carl C-Man Anderson, who's the drummer in that. So here I had a track that has nothing to do with me. Someone was asking me to reprogram some drums that they heard in a song. So they found a clip of the drums by themselves. They're a Lin drum kit from a well-known song that I won't name. And he wanted to figure out how the hi-hat pattern was done. But in order to create that track, that drum track, I needed to move it in time. What I'm doing here, though, is more important for guys who are doing remixes, because generally speaking, a lot of the original tracks, even when they say, oh, we know the tempo, it's 96 BPM or it's 130 BPM, when you drag it into Logic or Pro Tools or any other DAW, if you just type in 130, generally speaking, if it's a 4 or 5 minute song, it'll drift out of time even if you have the tempo correct. And so what Logic allows you to do is some really cool, simple features to get yourself a nice, even tempo and feel throughout the song. The first thing to do is to try to find the original tempo, the basic tempo of the song if you don't know it. If they've given it to you, obviously you can start from that tempo. So normally Logic pops up with 120. If I play this rhythm with the downbeat right dead on, you know, it immediately drifts off. The first hit, this shaker hits on, but everything else is completely drifting off. I already know from checking that the basic tempo is 123, and I did that by creating this short loop of the first measure and then letting it play while I just literally just changed the tempo until it looped evenly. Now this technique will only work if you're going to be editing or writing against a track that has a metronome recording or a drum machine as its basis, because those things don't drift on their own. The only thing you're dealing with is the drift between your system clock and the system clock of the person or the drum machine that created the song. At any rate, this is a perfect clock, and it's repairable because I can just follow along. So what we're going to do is something very similar, which is to use the slicing mode and turn on Flextime view here. It's already on, so it's Command F on my machine. And now that Flextime is activated, I'm going to do a trick that makes the editing a little bit easier. Finding the loop, by the way, I want to show you a trick before I continue. If you have trouble finding the tempo of a loop, one of the things you can do is cut a measure or a few measures as much as you want, and then create a simple loop. Start with a single measure usually, and take that measure and put it on the one. The reason you want to put it on the one if you're having trouble finding a loop, a tempo, is because when you change tempo, here, let's go back, I'm sorry. When you change tempo, the song will drift. So let's say we know this is 123, but let's say we started at 100 and we're trying to figure out the tempo. So you can hear that the metronome is completely out of time with this. So as we change this tempo, you'll see that, you know, if I put this on the one at 100 and make so the first hit in that beat hits on the one, as I change the tempo and get closer to the actual tempo of the song, it won't ever feel like the actual tempo because things are drifting, and including the first beat. So, however, if you take this loop and you put it on the first beat of the song, which is measure one, of course, and you press play, all you're trying to do is make a decent loop, you know. And now, okay, so even at 117, we know this isn't the correct tempo, but even at 117, it sounds pretty good. So what you do to start to fine tune it is make the loop longer, and you listen to that, and that does not actually sound that bad. Maybe 123 wasn't the correct tempo. And we'll just lengthen this out and make sure it's a nice even loop here as well. Yeah, 117 sounds pretty good, actually. Yeah, let's turn off Flex and Follow. Actually, I'm sorry. I wasn't supposed to be using Flex and Follow for this at all. I was supposed to simply... Oops. This is not a Flextime edit. This is just trying to find the tempo of a loop. All right, so now you can see that I'm definitely not the right tempo. So let's go up. I know it's 123, but let's assume that we went through this process. Yeah. And 123 is pretty much dead on for this, but I'm going to extend it even further. And see what happens. Now, I can tell here that eventually it's at this point, I can hear now that it has drifted out of time. Because our tempo is slightly fast, and I'll begin to start to manage that. by just slowing it down. And eventually you'll get to a point where you can play through the entire song with your fractional tempo and have an even loop the entire way through. That's pretty much it. I'm not going to do it for this piece, but that's pretty much what happens. And I've done it many, many times. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, I'm available on Facebook at Logic Pro X Audio Tech. This is Maurice Chevalier signing off. Peace.